Hello, today we're going to talk about macro recording in Excel spreadsheet. Macro programming is very useful. It can automatically get job done. It is not unique. It is inside in many different kind of programmings. But in Excel spreadsheet, you have a built-in macro recorder tool. It can be very easily to get started, and it can also be very powerful too. I know every day when we use Excel, we have so many things we do repetitively, such as you create a monthly or weekly sales report, you calculate sales total, you create customized tables, formatting, and create charts. So these things you do very similar except the data change. So if you can create a list of macro steps, it can save you lots of work. I believe after you learn how to use Excel macro recorder, you will find out so many things. You can use macros to replace those repetitive tasks. I want to also point out, after you finish recording macro in Excel, Excel will create VBA codes automatically for this macro. So you have a chance to go there, take a look at the recorded codes. You can learn, you can study, you can read, you can also edit, rewrite. So that is a wonderful way for you to get started on VBA learning as well. Things we have to get ready before we get started. In order to record macro, you have to enable two things. One is go to Excel options, go to Add-in Managers, click on Analysis Toolpack VBA. Number two, you need to go to Excel toolbar, right-click on Customize the ribbon, and you will have a listed different tools listed. On the right side window, you want to check the box called Developer. After you get these enabled, you are ready. After you finish recording macro, make sure you save everything in a macro enabled file, or the file extension is XLSM. As a beginner, I will always strongly urge you to backup files. Backup our original files, backup original data in additional Excel tabs. The reasons is a lot of time when you click on macro, and you make mistake, and you cannot go back to original data if it's already wiped out. Sometimes macro can even crash your file. So always you'll have your original file or data set backed up, so you at least have something to start over. So these are a few things we want to get ready before you actually go to recordings. I want to give you an overall preview on the macro recording procedures. Number one is you want to practice or preview your steps which you want to record into macro. Number two, you want to think about, do you want to have a relative reference option or not? So always ask yourself, where is your mouse starting and end positions? After you finish recording, you have two different ways to run the macro. I'm going to talk a little bit more on the use relative reference option. So this is the option you may want to turn on and off before you start the macro recording. Okay. By default, it is in absolutely self-reference. So remember, when we record macro, Excel is going to record every mouse position movement and every keyboard strokes. So in the absolute reference, Excel always go to specified cell reference. For example, A1, C5. There's advantage to turn on and record in relative reference where it is much more flexible to run your macro. And you can run the same macro in similar data in a different location if you wanted. Once you turn on the relative reference options, Excel is going to count the relative distance from the starting point. For example, always go to 3 columns to the right, go to 2 rows below, then do one action, then move on. Mouse position is very important in a multi-step macro recordings. The mouse finish position has to be the same of the starting point of next macro recording step. So in your practice, I will always ask you to try use with or without this relative reference options. Here I'm going to show you one of the macro example we're going to practice. It's quite simple. You have a used car data from car dealer. You want to copy, paste the first 3 columns to a new place, then select the last column to new place and copy paste. Right. So let's first preview the list of steps we actually want to record. I'm already listed, and it has actually 9 steps. Now we are ready. We're going to record this in an absolutely default reference setting, and we click on Record Macro, and the dialog pop-up window asks you the macro name. So you can use characters, numbers, and underscores, but you cannot use space or other special characters. By default, you will store the macro in this workbook. Sometimes you can choose an option to record macro saved in your personal macro Excel workbook. So that way you can use much more often and apply to more Excel workbooks. In this case, we enter car copy paste as a macro name. After we finish recording macro, there's 2 ways to run macro. One is go to macro icons, and it will display a list of the macro already created. You're going to select the one you want to run, click on Run. Another option, which is much more popular, is create a macro button, click on Run Through Macro button. So go to Excel Developer Toolbar and find out this briefcase icon, which is called Insert. We will create a macro button, which is first default form. You can draw somewhere, any place you want. Then you're going to link this form to one of the macros you already created. You can also add a text to put a description on this macro. By default, this is a much more popular way. I will also encourage you to do this when you run macro. I'm going to now talk about the VBA code which is recorded from your macro. So first, where are those VBA codes? So there's 2 ways to switch from Excel window to VBA window. Number 1 is you can use shortcuts. You can use shortkeys. Use Alt combined with F11, you can switch from Excel to VBA windows. Another way is you will go to Excel toolbar and take a look at the developer button, and the first icon is the VBA icon. Click on VBA, you switch from Excel to VBA. Click on Excel icon again, then you switch VBA back to Excel. Under VBA windows, and the left side listed all open Excel files, and listed under Excel objects listed all Excel tabs. And VBA codes are listed under modules. Okay. You can name modules to something easier to remember. So the one we recorded is under for module 1. Take a closer look. So this is a record macro procedure, sub-procedure. The macro name is called copy paste. As we recorded in absolutely reference mode, So it is actually quite easy to understand. You can probably guess we selected this table area, and we perform a copy action, then select a place, destination place, perform a paste, then do another similar option. So in the practice later on, I will encourage you to modify those existing code and change a macro to a new one. While Excel built-in macro code is powerful and easy, there's certain things that cannot be done. You can use VBA instead to accomplish more complicated procedures such as loops, conditional actions, or assign variables and specify data type, or which is much popular, things such as display a pop-up message or dialog boxes. So I here listed the two textbooks which talk about Excel and VBA combined in the financial modeling sense, and also an online course from Cal Poly Pomona, Mechanical Engineering. So hopefully you will enjoy and learn like macro coding in Excel. That's all.